Hi, Susie, do you want to start the full class, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're live.
The Planning Committee is a decision-making committee of the Council. It is important that a set procedure is followed. All committee members have received a full report on each planning application, either on paper or electronically. And it should be noted that committee members and officers may be using electronic devices for reference throughout the meeting. For each application, we'll first hear from the planning officer, followed by the parish or town council, then objectors, supporters, and local members. Each group will have 5 minutes to speak to the committee, after which members may ask questions of the speaker. The committee may then ask questions of clarification of the planning officer. The committee will then debate and vote on the application. Councillors wishing to ask a question or participate in debate are asked to indicate this by alerting myself or officers by raising a hand. Voting will be by show of hands. Members, please raise your hands clearly and keep them raised to allow a count to take place. If it's unclear how members are voting through a show of hands, I will ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of those present and how they are voting. A few housekeeping announcements. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediately to the right of this meeting room, and go to Assembly Point 9 and the outside area beyond the fire exit. The Democratic Services Office here will assist you. Everyone please ensure that the mobile phone is switched to silent or switched off for the duration of this meeting. Right, try to switch my phone off. Members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after their application has been heard are welcome to do so by the front door in reception. When the meeting is finished, I will ask for confirmation that the live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the meeting and make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. So that was item 1 on the agenda. Item 2 is apologies for absence.
We've had apologies from councillors Arlett, Dragonetti, Gordon Creed, Keats Rohan and Sadler. We have a number of substitutes. Councillor will be present as substitute for Councillor Dragonetti, but is running late. Councillor Turner is here as substitute for Councillor Keats Rohan, and Councillor James Laurie is here as substitute for Councillor Sadler.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. To adopt and sign as a correct record, Planning Committee minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of January 2026. Thank you. All agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Okay. Declaration of interest. To receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests, other registral interests and non-registral interests, or any conflicts of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. I see none. Urgent business.
No urgent business.
No urgent business. Public participation is 86. We'll take that in each agenda item as we get to it. So the first planning item is item 7 on the agenda, P25 S3037, land at 60 to 68 Broadway, Didcot, and the planning officer is Paul Bowers. Paul, can you take us through it, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is a Section 73 application, otherwise known as a variation of condition application. It is before members this evening as the recommendation of officers to grant planning permission conflicts with the views of Didcot Town Council. Members may recall that planning permission was granted last year at Planning Committee for the use of the land for a car wash and the creation of a new access. Following the grant of planning permission, the applicants entered into negotiations with Oxfordshire County Council in relation to a Section 278 agreement to secure the creation of the new access. The combination of those negotiations has necessitated a change to the approved access and required the applicant to vary their planning permission. It is not possible through a Section 73 application to revisit all of the issues surrounding the original planning permission. Rather, we must only consider the differences between what has been approved and what is being proposed. Members will be able to see from the report and the plans that the changes to the access are relatively modest. The approved scheme resulted in the loss of 8 on-street car parking spaces as a consequence of the requirement for a 36-metre long visibility display from the access going westward and 1 space to the east. Proposed changes increase the need for a longer visibility display of 47 metres to the west. This is roughly equates to the loss of an extent of on-street car parking amounting to 2 more spaces. In your officer's view, given the extent of remaining on-street car parking along Broadway and the availability of spaces within both the Orchard Centre car park and Edinburgh Drive public car park, there remains sufficient parking available in the town centre. The changes to the access meet the highway officer's approval, and consequently the changes do not result in a harmful impact to highway safety. Therefore, officers recommend that permission is granted to vary the conditions of the permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, our first speaker this evening is an objector, Kat Lewin Williams, who is online. Are you there, please?
Hi, yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. I can see you now.
Perfect. I'm okay to get started.
Yes. You've
Okay.
got 5 minutes when you start.
Thank you. I have quite a few things I want to run through and say, so I'm going to get on with it. I'll talk quite quickly. So I hope it's all easy to understand. My husband and I will have lived in our house for 2 years in April. We bought a property in Didcot for a few reasons, because we want to live somewhere that was close to work, had a friendly community and was under development, a place that would get bigger and better as time went on. So I wanted to start my turn to speak by acknowledging that I am in fact pro-development. I want Didcot to have new businesses, and I want the people who live here to have that opportunity. But I don't think that a hand car wash on Broadway is the right opportunity. First, and perhaps most importantly, Broadway is an extremely busy road. It's very frequently filled with bumper-to-bumper traffic to the point where we can't get off our own driveway. You only need to go on places like the Didcot community page to see how frustrated residents are getting with traffic in Didcot, a major culprit of which is the Broadway. Buses come down our road with Travis Perkins, lorries come down our road, all of which will put traffic to a standstill. A car wash, which by its very nature brings more traffic to an area, and if busy, will lead to cars waiting on the road to enter, I believe will cause absolute havoc. I know this for a fact because we see it play out anytime there are roadworks, when Thames Water comes out, when literally anything gets built. Then there are the parking spaces to consider. We're incredibly lucky to have a driveway, but a lot of our neighbours, do not. And they rely on these parking spots, which run down the side of the road. Looking at the report, it argues that there is sufficient car parking elsewhere, to which I would say, name it. The report doesn't name a single alternative location, survey, or piece of evidence to support that, which I don't believe is good enough. The nearest 2 car parks are paid only, and any on-street parking is on roads with the exact same issues we're having, concentrating it on a smaller area rather than actually resolving it. If none of that persuades you, how about the fact that there are too many hand car washes in the local area to warrant an addition of another? Waves hand car wash is 0.8 miles from the plot, and Didcot hand car wash is 0.7 miles from it. What town needs 3 hand car washes in a mile radius rather than improved cycling and walking routes, green spaces, more access, or a car wash on the other side of Didcot to serve those residents which might find it hard to access the ones that are already here? I would also ask, what does this application provide that these other car washes don't? And if this development is in fact so beneficial, why is a good chunk of it only approved temporarily? And what guarantee do we have as residents that this temporary structure won't become permanent fixture with another application? I love living in Didcot. I love that it's constantly changing. Every time a new business opens, I make sure to visit. I've been to this new Japanese restaurant, Meisaka, up the road twice already. We're watching the development of Guildhouse Games, which is going to open April. I make sure to buy food from places like Euromarket. These are brilliant businesses run from the community, that add value to our local area. They create new jobs rather than just displacing them from other businesses nearby. For me, the bottom line is that we cannot develop for development's sake and put those decisions above the experience of people who actually already live here. You cannot keep adding without addressing the infrastructure, a vital instance of which is our roadways. And quite frankly, one of the things that frustrates me the most about this application is the people making these decisions won't be affected, but we as the residents will. So to sum up, the local council objects, myself and 9 other residents that were able to respond to the planning application object, and nothing in the committee's report reassures me that this development will bring enough benefit to our community to outweigh the significant detrimental impact it will have on traffic and parking. Which, apologies, might sound trivial, but I would invite you to think about how frustrated you feel sitting in traffic on your way into Abingdon, Wantage, Oxford, and now imagine that traffic is on your road where you live, and you have to sit in it every day just to get to work, go
30
to the
seconds
shop.
there.
I'm almost done. Take your kids to the park, do things that involve leaving your house. So today I would ask that you not just weigh the applicant's interests when making a decision, but weigh as the residents too. I would ask that you refuse the application, or at the very minimum, defer it until proper evidence is provided of the things that I addressed. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
Okay, thank you very much. Kirsty, any questions? Councillor Beeler?
You talked about loss of amenities in terms of parking spaces for residents. Just on Google Maps, it appears that it's Monday to Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., 30 minutes, no return within 1 hour. Is that the case? So you're talking about parking outside of those hours, are you?
Yes. Sorry, I'm just trying to think of the best way to formulate my response. I think I don't have a drive, so I can't comment on other people's usage, but I personally think there would be a significant impact to not be able to stop outside of your own house for 30 minutes. It feels trivial, it feels like a small amount, but this is where they live and they have literally nowhere else to park. So yeah, that would be my response to that one.
But if you're parking there, presumably you're having to move at 8 a.m. in the morning.
Yes, yeah, but you know, there is no other better option, so you do needs must.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question. Are you aware that we're not here to consider the principle of the car wash? We're here simply to consider the change in the access to car wash.
Okay, that wasn't communicated in the invite.
That's what the application is for.
Can please may I finish?
Change for the access. That's all it says.
Please could I finish?
Yes.
As an unskilled member of the community that doesn't have experience in this, the email that was sent for the invitation did not make that clear. And I was sent a very sort of template-based follow-up to that. So no, I wasn't aware of that. I apologize if I did not speak on the correct item. I feel very passionate about it, but that was not made clear to me from my point of view as an unexperienced member of the public.
Okay. Councillor Topping.
Yeah, just a couple of observations. I think he's made some very good points. I know this piece of road extremely well. I live in East Hagbourne. I very often drive into Didcot, and I use those spaces when I'm using the shops just further down. It's very helpful to have them. And I remember when we were considering this about a year ago, that was a major aspect in the decision-making process, was the loss of the spaces on that stretch of road. You also made a second point, which I think is important, is how the site's going to be regulated in terms of queues potentially forming. And that piece of road is very, very congested. So I think you made some very good points. Thank you.
I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. There are no further questions. All right. The next speaker is Mr. Roy Holt. Again, I think is online somewhere.
Can you hear me now?
Mr. Holt. Yeah,
Good
yeah.
Good evening.
I can hear you. You have 5 minutes
Loud
to
enough.
start speaking. Yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let's move my cat off though. I do appreciate what has been said before, and by by the planning officer and so on. This car wash has planning permission. We're still within the 3-year period to implement it, and it's the consideration of parking was very well explored at the time of the last application. In fact, it was a second of 2 applications. The first one was the car parking, that was the car entrance. Now, today's application rolls around 3 points. And it's been brought on to us by the highways. It's not because the applicant wants to gain any advantage. There's nothing for him no benefit for him out of this. It is entirely put on us by the highways department. When we did our first planning application, second application that was approved, the highways planning person took a great deal of interest in the job. They consulted, they raised no objection in the end, and they provided us with the specification that they required. That was the length of the sight lines, the radius of the curb, and the width of the road in particular as you drive into the site. Now, by way of explanation, since that is when we started to work through the Section 278 agreement with the Highways Construction Department, different department, that's all it was. They insisted that the road was widened by half a metre, the actual gateway into the site was widened by half a metre, that the radius of the curbs was increased from 3 metres to 6 metres, and of course the sight line was lengthened, which really is now my client, the applicant, has no interest in getting this changed other than to comply with Highways demands, and quite honestly, the only loss the public would suffer would be the loss of 2 additional car parking spaces. Now, there are other places to park, but I accept the loss of the 2 spaces. There's not. It's a simple fact of life here. But this was not something that the applicant or anybody involved on our side asked for. It was imposed upon us by the Highways Department, a different department of the Highways Department. Now, cannot see any effect on anybody for falling in line with the Highways Department. They claim it is a safer public situation for what they're looking for from what is approved. I can't argue with that. I'm not a highways engineer, but it is different to the planning approval, so it is a necessary part of a Section 73 application. In any further disruption, like overturning the permission for the car park at the car wash itself, would be a great expense to the applicant, and that wouldn't be sustainable at appeal. Most of the time, applications for this sort of minor change are dealt with as a designated decision by the planning officer. And we do have the support of the county planning officer here. Whether there's 3 car washes in the town or not, that was all discussed. That was all discussed and agreed. So you just stick to the changes that are on this Section 73 agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holt. Committee, has anyone got any questions? Seeing none, so thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to the planning officer. Probably can't answer this, Paul. Why did the Highways not object in the first place? They did, or they didn't?
They didn't object. Well, in terms of the application that was granted planning permission, the access that was put forward was considered in terms of highway safety and was considered safe. It's obviously the following the grant permission, they'd gone to enter the agreement with the technical engineers at the county council who have required some slight changes to be made. That's necessitated them to make the application to us. Consequence, the upshot is the increase of the visibility display that from 36 metres to 47 metres, that equates to the length of about 2 cars and 2 car parking spaces, in addition to what we've already approved.
Okay. Richie, any questions? Councillor Topic.
Paul, can you remind me how many on-site spaces there will be for people waiting to take their car through the car wash?
The approved plan shows 7 car parking spaces that will be within the site, as well as which were contained centrally within the site. And then there was a circulation area around where you went in one way and you came out another.
And those 7 would be for use by customers as opposed to the staff of the site.
The conditions of the permission. referring to the conditions, and there isn't one. I mean, there's nothing in there to preclude employees of the establishment parking.
I only say this because I think the lady made a very good point that if you have too many people queuing to use it, they could queue right out of the site and cause chaos on an already very busy piece of land. So maybe that could be conditioned that all 7 of those spaces have to be available for customer use.
I can come back on that point, Chair.
Yeah.
I'm
That
not
would
sure
be
that would pass.
acceptable. That would certainly be acceptable to us.
It would certainly help the problem that she raised, I believe.
Through you, Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
We can't essentially revisit what was already been accepted. So the council have already accepted that 7 spaces that are not purely allocated for parking associated with the users of the facility. That was considered acceptable at the time, and that's not part of the elements of the application that are different from what we have considered and accepted before. We can only really apply any conditions that may be associated with the changes that are being proposed, and those changes really relate just purely to how the access is onto the.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. We're here to consider the changes to the conditions. We can't go back and readdress any existing ones.
Jane,
We
because
can't go
it
back
looks
to
as if
that.
the applicant might be happy with that change.
I'm looking now. It is condition 5, which just says it doesn't detail what the sizes are. It just says they have to be created prior to the first occupation of the site, but it doesn't say what they are, and we haven't got the drawings to know what those are. But it's not relevant anyway because we can't address that. Yeah, we can only look at what the changes are that this section 73 has asked for. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, you referred to circulation spaces. Is the 7 spaces included in that circulation spaces?
So I'm not sure we've got plans accompanying this application, but essentially within the site there is the car park. The 7 car parking spaces are contained within the site, and then around those spaces is a circulation road where vehicles come in, they go into the canopies, have their car wash, and then go out, all going in one clockwise direction. The car parking spaces are contained within that circular area.
So how many? So how many cars would be accommodated on the site in total?
There are
treatment.
7 spaces, and there were canopies. There were 3 separate canopies. How many vehicles fit beneath those canopies that could be washed at any one time? I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Councillor Chair, sorry.
So just to clarify, this is nothing about the previous application. This is purely just down to whether we allow them to widen the road because something changed after we signed it off already.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, that's not for Paul to come back and tell you that, but
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good. Glad for that clarification. So basically, all this application is just reality that they will lose an extra 2 on-street parking more than what they had planned because of a change.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
okay, I'm looking for a motion then, please, on proposal. Councillor Chairs,
It's already been signed off. I will put it for acceptance. It's already been signed off. This is purely just we're widening the road because something changed.
okay. I'll second it. Councillor Higgins, thank you. Just to speak now.
Yeah, happy to. So just to reiterate, it seems to be a relatively minor technical change. We're here because of an objection from Didcot Town Council because of loss of parking. I haven't seen anything. Obviously, they haven't come along to talk to the committee. Anything from them to suggest why these additional 2 spaces are such a sort of fundamental loss or alter the characteristics of the road in any way. I completely sympathise with points made by the speaker in objection, but we're not here to adjudicate on principle the development. So
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're up for debate, yeah. Councillor Donald.
Yes, can I just applaud the objectors for being so eloquent and wish that she'd been there for the original application, which was about the car wash, not the slight alteration to the road. And it would have been also useful for Didcot Town Council to have been here too, not myself as district councillor, to actually maybe explore their objections. However, this is just a minor variation on access to the facility. And essentially, because highways have no objection, then there are no planning reasons why it can't go ahead, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Any other contributions to the debate, Councillor Topping?
Well, just to say I didn't like this first time round, and I did even less this time round, so I'll be voting against it.
Okay. No further comments. I'll go back to the proposer to sum up.
It's just an increase to keep it in regulation, so there isn't really much we can say about it to go against it. It is what it is.
Okay, we've got the vote. All those in favour of the proposal for officer's recommendation, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those against? 2 against. That's carried. Welcome, Councillor Rod.
I'm sorry I'm late, Chair.
Okay.
Sorry, members. Thank you.
You're here now.
Yes.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. So we move on.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, request actually.
Right, so we'll move on to P25 S3436 S73 Ivy Companies Dunstan Green. Oh, excuse me. Planning Officer Mark Pullen. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was just going to mention that we've got Lee Travers here, who's the flood risk engineer. He will be available for questioning when we go back to the planning officer. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you will have received a supplementary report this afternoon, I hope, from Lee Travers. Yeah. So, Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission to vary the wording of condition 9 of the original planning application P24 S0673. Condition 9 relates to the surface water drainage scheme to serve the development, which was granted planning permission last year. This application also seeks to address the requirements of the surface water drainage condition. This application is referred to planning committee this evening as the view of your officer to support the development conflicts with the views of the local parish council. As explained within the report before you, the developer has exhausted all available options to provide a viable surface water drainage scheme that discharges within the site. As a result, the only option available for them is to discharge surface water into the foul sewer network. This does not accord with the requirements of the original condition, which specifically stated that the discharge of surface water into the foul sewer network would not be supported by the council. Following a number of failed attempts to discharge this condition and through discussions with Thames Water, the council now accepts the option of discharging surface water into the foul sewer network under Part H of the building regulations, which permits discharge to surface water to the foul sewer in accordance with the established surface water drainage hierarchy, provided all reasonable, practical, alternative means of disposal have first been explored and demonstrated to be unfeasible. In this instance, those alternative options have been fully considered and exhausted. Accordingly, your officers recommend that planning permission is granted tonight for the proposed variation of this condition and to agree that the submitted surface water drainage strategy is acceptable and addresses the requirements of this condition. It is recommended that 2 additional conditions are added to the grant of planning permission, which would require the compliance of both surface and foul drainage systems, which would require a report being submitted by an appropriately qualified engineer, which suitably demonstrates that the sustainable drainage systems have been installed and completed in accordance with the approved schemes. As Councillor Brereton said tonight, one of the council's drainage engineers is in attendance and happy to answer questions members may have in respect of drainage matters in relation to this development. And yes, you will have also been sent an additional appendix to this application today, which is authored by the drainage engineer, setting out a brief history of the site and outlines the chronology account of how we reached this stage of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, we'll go to our speakers. Councillor Andrew Green.
That's Chair.
Yes, please. Yeah. And you're 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to introduce myself. My name's Andrew Green. I represent the Iron Dunstan Parish Council. Personally, I've lived in this parish for 15 years at 2 different addresses. So I have a good working knowledge of what happens within the village. I realise some of you here may not understand the topography of the area. You may not have visited it. We represent 3 villages. We have Dunstan, which is on top of a hill. The hill is probably it's about 400 metres down, a 400 metre length road, dropping quite severely down to another village, which is Playhatch. Then you have the main Reading to Henley Road, and the other side of that you have Sonning Eye. So Dunstan is on top of the hill, and unfortunately everything runs downhill towards Playhatch, which unfortunately is difficult for Playhatch. Since I've been in Dunstan, Playhatch has constantly flooded. It floods with surface water mainly. However, we have had an occasion where Thames Water have been pumping out the sewage tank, which is at the bottom of the hill. So they have tankers there parked on the roundabout taking away foul waste, which is a concern because if those tankers don't do that, then we have environmental issues with flooding at the bottom of the hill. I know this, majority of it is surface water. I know this personally because my old property flooded a couple of times due to these issues. This proposal that this development is to put the surface water that's coming from the site and from these properties into the sewer. We, as a council, object to this. Parish council object to this based on the grounds that we're already under capacity when we have lots of rain and lots of water coming down the hill into Playhatch. We constantly are receiving complaints from our residents, both in Playhatch and Dunstan, regarding flooding, and there's been a lot of concern about this development in itself. From our understanding, no other property in Dunstan puts its water into the foul sewer. They have all found alternatives to take away their surface water. So why these new properties have to do that, we don't understand. At present, the site is being constructed and we are seeing mechanical pumps being used to pump out the properties of water in this last wet period that we've had. So the scheme that they are proposing allows water to come at a specific rate that Thames Water say is the maximum. However, what happens when it floods and we cannot keep it to that rate? So the water needs to be expelled at a greater rate. That's going to put bigger issues onto the surface water. And Thames Water have said they will allow 1 litre per second to be expelled from the site. If there is water that wants to come off the site at over 1 litre a second, where does it go? How, in what place does it go? Does it go into the sewer through an overflow system, or does it stay on the property and flood the properties? If it floods the properties, then the new residents that are buying multi-million-pound properties are going to end up with very wet properties, and they will probably want to know why and who is responsible for that. Unfortunately, we're also seeing a lot of complaints regarding the developers' actions. They've already had a stop notice put on them. Unfortunately, there's been complaints about urinating on the site. They've been threatening people. Personally, I've been told to go forth and multiply a couple of times, which is very unpleasant. So we're concerned about the attitude of the developer and the legacy that they will leave behind. We're also a bit bemused why other alternatives haven't been looked at. There's about 400 acres going down to the road on a steep hill on both sides, on the south and the east. Why we're not using, there's a pond to the back of it, there's trees. Why aren't we venting the water down the back of the property to run away onto this land? So in short, we are very concerned about this and we object to it, and we feel there should be an alternative found to punt this away.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lucy, any questions? That's a rock.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for coming to speak to us. I just had a couple of questions. The first is, I was actually in Dunstan 2 weeks ago. The houses have been built, haven't they? Or did I imagine?
No, there's effectively, in my layman's terms, there's 3 blocks, and the centre block is being split into 2 semi-detaches. So what they've done is they've built the block on the left and they built the centre block, but they haven't built the right block as yet.
Which is plot 4.
Which is plot 4.
Yeah, yeah.
So what we're finding is that I don't know what their theory behind that is, but at the moment we've had videos sent to us and complaints that they're pumping out the houses and the water's going straight onto the road because they're already flooding, where they haven't found alternatives. And the house on the right is the lowest point. Yes. And because it's the lowest point, that's providing, there's pictures I think that have been provided by local residents, which I'm not sure whether you've seen or not, which then shows that the plot is already underwater before you actually build a building on it. Now, we object to it beyond the grounds that we're just very concerned that it's going to cause problems not only for Dunstan, but for poor people in Playhatch when the water goes downhill, as inevitably it does. I mean, even our local MP, hopefully it's written to everybody and everybody's seen that letter. And he's very much against this and shares the same belief as the parish council. There must be an alternative way of dealing with water.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? I see none. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it was quite clear to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have next speakers are John Goldsmith and John Miller, who are objectors. Welcome again. You have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening, Chair, members. This application is presented as a small technical amendment, but it is not. It seeks to overturn a clear planning condition that prohibited surface water entering the foul sewer, a safeguard that existed for a very good reason. Members, there are 3 key issues you should consider tonight. First, the original planning condition clearly prohibited surface water entering the foul sewer. The Section 73 application now seeks to replace that with permission to discharge up to 1 litre per second into the Thames Water foul sewer network. This is not a clarification of wording, it represents a fundamental change to the approved drainage strategy. Second, the site itself already shows signs of drainage problems. There is prolonged standing water across the plots, mechanical pumps running continuously, and visible staining on brickwork showing water levels rising close to finished floor levels. Plots appear dependent on artificial pumping, simply to remain usable. If pumps fail, attenuation tanks fill, or during prolonged rainfall events, surface water will enter the foul sewer system and cause flooding. Thirdly, allowing the change places additional burden on an already stressed sewer network in an area that has experienced flooding and sewage discharge. Local foul sewers in the area already surcharged during heavy rainfall events, and sewer-related flooding incidents have been recorded locally. The issue is not whether 1 litre per second sounds modest. The question is whether the receiving network has resilience during peak rainfall events and cumulative loading. There are also legitimate technical questions. The drainage design has been revised numerous times, and yet drainage infrastructure was installed early in construction. Members should therefore be satisfied that as-built levels match the approved design, and that the drainage strategy has not been retrospectively altered to accommodate what was already constructed. Development has progressed while these drainage issues remain unresolved. If protective planning conditions can be relaxed after construction has begun, the purpose of these safeguards is weakened. Members, this application replaces a planning condition that prevented surface water entering the foul sewer with one that now allows it. And once that change is made, the risk transfers from the developer to the community. I therefore respectfully ask members to refuse this section 73 variation and require a sustainable surface water solution that does not increase the burden on the foul sewer network. Thank you.
Good evening. Sorry if I overlap with some of the things John said. I'm also a local resident and I live less than 100 metres away from Ivy Cottages. I'm a chartered engineer with 40 years experience of construction and development business. The proposed amendment to the planning consent is a contradiction of the NPPF, the local plan, Thames Water objectives and policy, as well as the sustainable development principles that we're all trying to work with. Why is it even being considered when sustainable solutions exist? This is a nationally recognised risk to our countryside and rivers, which is being exacerbated by this kind of irresponsible action. I don't know if anybody saw Dirty Business on television recently, but there are some parallels. Even given the conditioned agreement of Thames Water, is this committee satisfied that a workable, practical and manageable solution has been proposed? We are not, and the impact of this is significantly increased risk to flooding for both homeowners and the residents of Playhatch. I also take exception to the planning officer's report. It is selective in its content, and the committee is therefore being misled. I'll give you a couple of points. Local residents' comments are not fairly represented. 27 objections were raised, as well as our MP. The planning history noted does not reflect the facts, nor the repeated non-compliance of the applicant over the last 12 months. Ground conditions were all known prior to planning consent, and conditions subsequently included. Why is condition 9 now considered unnecessary? Could the planning officer also please confirm that an objection to condition 9 was made within the statutory 6-month period? Thames Water's conditional agreement requires SODC to ensure that a maximum of 1 litre per second is discharged. I have no faith that this can be achieved given the complexity of the design, the apparent competence of the developer and the builder. Thank you. And the ongoing management of the drainage system. In 4 separate properties, this is not going to be easy to manage into the future. Is this committee and the SODC prepared to bear the responsibility, including very probable legal action and claims in the future, for the increased flooding and harm to the public that will result from the approval of this amendment? If not, then this amendment should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Councillor Topping.
Yes, just ready to ask what alternatives would you be able to come up with? My understanding is that the reason why this change was asked for was that the developer found that they couldn't deal with the surface water within the site and had to come up with an alternative to that. Do you believe that they could drain the site properly within the site area, or indeed by taking in adjoining land? What are the alternatives to using the foul water system?
Yeah, not within the site area, no.
No.
But for the last God knows how many thousand years, that whole area has drained.
Yeah.
For the last 100 years, those 2 properties that exist there have drained.
Mm.
They haven't had a problem. there is land at the back, and as my colleague from the council said, there's 400 acres down the hill all the way to the Thames, which is where water goes naturally without being mixed with foul water. It's a QED for me.
So you're saying that it could be pumped out of the site and into the land behind?
Well, the same landowner that sold the land owns the land behind.
Right. So you're suggesting that the developer here should have got control over more land in order that they would be able to drain the site.
Have an agreement with the landowner.
Yes.
But why should the rest of the countryside suffer?
Sorry, Councillor Topping, I can see where you're going, but we need to keep to what's on the agenda. Yeah. Are there any further questions? Okay, so thank you for your presentation and your time. I think probably your question for the slides today. Next speaker, which is Jonathan Jarman. Who is the agent? Welcome, Mr. Jarman. You have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. I won't keep you long. I'll start off by stating that the proposed drainage strategy is one that has been discussed with the council and Thames Water over a long period of time. It certainly has not been a fly-by-night operation. We now have a clear situation where Thames Water has agreed that the proposed drainage strategy is acceptable. As per the committee report, the council's drainage officer has agreed again that the strategy is acceptable. And RWA, the engineers who have independently designed the scheme, have also ensured that the strategy works. This has been a collaborative approach with the experts who are responsible for ensuring the drainage solution will work are all in agreement. In short, the proposed drainage strategy is perfectly acceptable and should be approved. Furthermore, Thames Water confirmed that there is in fact capacity within the combined sewer system, and over the longer term they're working on a strategy to reduce pressures on the public sewer network. The design of the drainage strategy has therefore been developed with an abundance of caution, meaning the perceived risks that have been highlighted in our view are unlikely to materialise. There are of course 2 houses on the plot, and I just want to make clear that those have just been extended, they're not new dwellings, and then you've got 2 additional dwellings. So we're not talking about 4 new dwellings. Whilst we acknowledge there is obviously local concern, and the purpose of the plan committee is of course a regulatory one, and in this case it was very clear the officers have sought to scrutinise the proposal at every step, hence the long drawn out process to get to this state. To go against their advice on what is a technical matter would, in our view, be an unacceptable precedent. And planning permission, of course, already been approved for the scheme, and it's about time we should be allowed to get on with completing the new homes. Given the level of scrutiny that officers have given the proposal, we trust the members will follow the advice of the officers and approve the variation to the condition. This will then avoid the need for an appeal and potential for costs. Thank you.
Okay. Short and sweet. Okay, thank you. Committee, I see questions already. Councillor Bearder, let's just start with that.
You say obviously this application was already approved, but it was subject to a condition that you wouldn't mix surface water with foul water. That's correct, isn't it?
Originally, and that and the hope at the time was that would be, doable. But as has been explained, that the options have been looked at and exhausted, and this was considered to be the only alternative. And that discussion has been open with Thames Water and the council's drainage officer and the case officer.
Thank you very much. Could you give us a little bit more colour, if it's available, on what the original plan was, or the original intention was that hasn't come to fruition and led to this variation, and if you're able, sort of how drainage, surface water drainage performs on the plot as it is at the moment?
Well, I'm not a drainage engineer, so I can't really give you that information because it's beyond my expertise. But the point is whether this drainage strategy works, and in my opinion, it does.
Councillor Rob.
Yeah, thank you. I've got two questions. The first is, paragraph 7.10 of our report tells us that Part H of the building regs permits discharge of surface water to a foul sewer, provided all reasonably practicable alternative means, and Mark, I might have to come to you about this, of disposal have first been explored and demonstrated to be unfeasible. Can you talk us through, for our own peace of mind, what other alternatives, what reasonably practical alternatives you've explored that have proven to be unfeasible?
Well, again, I'm not the drainage engineer, so this might be a question for Lee Travers.
But you're the developer, so I assume that you have come up with some alternatives and you've been in liaison with the planning team.
So I can lead those discussions. That was led by the drainage engineer.
Okay, I'll ask Lee that then. And could I ask you, perhaps you don't know, what measures are there in place to prevent the volume of surface water that's being discharged into the foul sewer from exceeding the limit of 1 litre per second, which Thames Water has quite clearly said is the absolute limit?
Yeah, I think there's a stop mechanism which prevents that happening.
So what happens when the stop mechanism kicks in?
Well, I think it's again, I would defer to Mr. Travers on not an expert on drainage at all.
But you'll be selling the houses.
I won't be selling houses, but
okay, thank you.
Just following on from my earlier point, I think the problem here is that you are putting 4 enormous properties on a very small site that you didn't buy enough land from the person who owns the land behind to enable a proper drainage system to be done within the site. And that is the crux of the problem here. There are 2 tiny little properties on this site originally, and you are putting now 4 enormous properties on this site and are covering most of the ground area with buildings. And it's no surprise to me that this is the result. Basically, you took far too little land for a scheme of this size. You've only got to look at the positions of these buildings.
Chair, may I intervene? The planning permission was granted.
Yes.
These comments are not relevant to this application. Okay. The planning permission was granted.
But they are relevant to the problem with drainage.
You cannot revisit.
You can't revisit the application. It's purely to do with the section.
But this is what has caused the problem with drainage. It's insufficiently large site for what you're building. That's the problem.
I don't think any of us disagree with that, but we do have to keep on topic of the planning.
Yeah, sorry. We are still with questions to the agent over there. Are there any further questions to the agent? There are no further questions. So thank you very much for your time and your presentation. Okay. We now need to we now need to go back to Mark Cullen and Lee Travers. I'm sure you've got some questions for them, which may be relevant. Councillor Norman.
I've just got a couple of questions. I'm somewhat puzzled by this application coming at all, because on section 710, as Councillor Rob already pointed out, it says until the 2010 Act is formally enacted, there is no statutory mechanism to refuse a surface water discharge to the public foul sewer. And then there are some conditions for that which have been fulfilled. So it appears that we are not able to stop this in any case. So my question to the officer first would be, is that your understanding of that section?
Yeah, absolutely, that is correct. So as soon as they've exhausted all options within the hierarchy, which begins with soakaways to undertake infiltration testing, if that fails, attenuation of restricted discharge to a water course, that fails, attenuation of restricted discharge to a surface water sewer, and then finally to a foul sewer. So they'd already exhausted that via their site investigation, all the percolation testing, etc. they undertook. Obviously, years ago, you never had really BRE 365 in place, so you didn't have such as sort of strict criteria to meet in order to get favourable infiltration rates. So therefore, you used to get away with putting soakways, etc., in clay, but we have to adhere to that guidance document. Does that cover that?
That covers that. Thank you. There's a second part to this. Do I understand from 7.7 and from my reading of all of it? Obviously, we've had to have a steep learning curve in drainage science. Do I understand that this will only be required in the 1 in 100-year storm event? Is that
no? So this would operate in any storm event, whether that's a 1 in 1 year, 1 in 10, 1 in 30, 1 in 100. But this system has been sized to accommodate up to a 1 in 100-year storm plus a 40% allowance for climate change. If that were to exceed, then obviously you get flooding. You then look at your exceedance routing. Where's that surface water therefore going to go? They provide the exceedance arrows. I've had a look at the topo. It's going to run off down the patio and run off basically into the hard standing area. But we can only look. So what they're governed by is accommodating surface water up to a 1 in 30-year storm. Below ground, these guys have actually designed it to accommodate a 1 in 100-year storm plus a 40% allowance for climate change. So it's well over designed effectively.
And my third question was really to do with quantities. As a farmer, I know, because we use it all the time, that a night's rain, an inch on an acre is 100 tons. So every that's a colossal quantity of water in a night's rain. This litre a second is only 3,600 litres, a third of a tonne an hour. If you had a heavy night's rain on that site, back of the envelope suggests this is about 60 tonnes of water. This is a third of a tonne an hour. So this is a very, very small quantity of water compared to the amount that is already having to be disposed of on that site. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, and hence why Thames Water have confirmed they have capacity within the network. So they take all of this into account. That's simply the lowest you can restrict the discharge down to. It's not possible to restrict it any lower than that. There's just not controls on the market to be able to do so at the moment anyway.
Are you talking about 1 litre per second?
Yeah, with regard to the 1 litre per second. So that's via a hydro brake. So it's an orifice.
Yeah.
So a suitably sized hole, which is provided by the manufacturer to restrict it down to that rate.
Right. And as I asked, sorry, James, have you finished with your?
Yes, thank
you. Yes. Through you, Chair. Sorry. As I asked the agent just now.
Yeah.
What happens when the stop happens? I'm assuming then it goes into an attenuation tank, or does it just bubble up under the ground?
Yeah, so effectively how the system operates is the water channels itself down to the hydro brake. The hydro brake's obviously restricting it, so the water level rises within the system. And that's why it's all appropriately controlled throughout to slow that water down and to encourage the attenuation throughout the network.
So it can't really exceed 1 litre per second because
it cannot exceed 1 litre per second, no, because when the manufacturer, they provided the manufacturer's detail whereby it provides, so without going into too much detail, the restricted outflow is governed by the head within the chamber. So the height you have within that chamber, according to the manufacturer's spec sheet, I think they only require a 0.545 metre head. So that's to the top of the chamber, between the hydro brake and the top of the chamber for that to operate at 1 litre per second. Yeah. They have just over 600, so they're more within that tolerance.
Thank you.
Quick question to the Chair.
Yeah.
How reliable are these systems? I'm being ignorant here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so long as they're maintained, of course, then perfectly reliable. They're used on, almost every development site nowadays.
As a supplementary, should there be a condition to maintain it?
Yes, so we do have. Well, we've been able to attach a couple of conditions whereby, subsequent to the construction of the scheme, they need to provide us with a CCTV survey, photographic schedule, maintenance details, etc., like that. So we can actually review the installation after they've installed it.
Yeah, I think.
But the ongoing maintenance, absolutely impossible to do so. You wouldn't be able to. Right. You wouldn't be able to attach a condition to govern that. Okay. It needs to be enforceable so that our planning enforcement team can go out and, enforce on it.
So you can be sure that it's actually working at the time.
Absolutely. So if we get any get any complaints.
You can't be, yeah.
Totally.
Councillor Turner.
I wonder about the validity of some of these statements, 1 in 1,000 year flood event, 1 in 100 and 1 in 30. I live in a village, Chelgrove, with a number of planning applications, which have been referred to 1 in 100 year events, but we've had 3 1 in 100 year events since 2007, with 8 to 9 inches of water running down the high street. What value should we place on those? How can I trust them?
Yeah, this is what's set out in the non-statutory SODC guidance, which is what we have to accord with, a bit like the local standards, what are published by Oxford County Council, albeit that's for major development. So they're only required to accommodate for 1 in 30 year storm below ground. Otherwise, you just simply wouldn't be able to develop these sites if you started looking up towards the 1 in 1,000 year, etc. So that's the regulation, what's out there at the moment, and the standards, what they have to design to. And like I said earlier on, in accordance with non-statutory SODC guidance, you only have to accommodate surface water below ground up to the 1 in 30. Yeah. Whereas on this particular site, they've got it up to the 1 in 100 year storm, plus a 40% allowance for climate change. When everybody says about 1 in 100 year storm, it doesn't mean it happens in once in 100 years. It's a probability of it happening in any given year. Yes, but the probability, so it's a percentage chance, so it's a 1% chance of it happening in any given year. So technically happen, every year for the next 100 years.
I mean, we the fire brigade out and they put 2 8-inch flexible pipes through the village, from one end to the other.
Sure.
Unfortunately, not using Chelgrove as a floodplain, flooded Southampton.
Yes, yeah.
Can I test that?
Yeah.
Councillor Beardy, your question.
Okay, I see your difficulty in answering the question.
If they can, and the developer can effectively put the surface water into the powered sewage treatment plant, if they explored other possibilities, why was it ever a condition originally?
Well, I guess it was me kind of trying it on as well at the same time, being completely transparent, try and, deter them from connecting to the foul sewer. In reflection, it might not have even been an enforceable condition, but I tried my very best to prevent it. I tried getting Thames Water to support that as well. But as soon as they confirmed their agreement to it, there's not really a lot else I could do.
Thank you for the honesty there.
Yeah, it's pretty transparent. Just on reflection, it probably wasn't enforceable, and that's why we had to reconsider.
Yeah, all right. Okay, committee. I think we've exhausted the questions. Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand exactly everything that's going on, but we're required to make a judgment. And to do that, I need a proposal. Councillor Bearder.
I propose we reject the application.
You propose?
Because putting foul sewage water within, put surface water in foul sewage is not appropriate.
I just allowed.
No, we're done.
No, not really, but I think I might come back to you in a moment. So you're proposing refusal on the grounds that you shouldn't be putting surface water into a foul sewer. Okay. Is that seconded? See no seconder for that, so that falls. I'll have a different proposal, please. Councillor Norman.
I propose that we approve the application.
You propose approval in accordance with the officer's recommendations. Is that seconded? Reluctantly. Councillor Higgins, thank you. You wish to speak now?
No, I'll reserve my mind.
Okay. All right. Councillor Norman, do you want to elaborate on your proposal? Or
well, I
come back to you later if you wish, but
come back to me later.
Come back to you later. Okay. It's open then for debate. Councillor Rob.
I think one of the speakers mentioned dirty business. I have seen it. I'm in it. So episode 2. So I do know about this. I've been campaigning about sewage since 2019. But as planning committee members, we have to make decisions in accordance with planning policy and with law. And it's pretty clear from paragraph 710 that at present there is no legal mechanism by which we can refuse this application. At present, under the building regs, the developer is permitted to discharge surface water to the foul sewer in accordance with the drainage hierarchy. They have been through that process, as our drainage expert has confirmed. They've come up with this solution. Do I love it? No, I do not. But it meets all the criteria. Thames Water have approved it. It's going to be limited to 1 litre a second. It's over-engineered, as our drainage engineer has outlined. All other options have been exhausted. I'm afraid we don't have any option other than to approve this. So for that reason.
Councillor Donald.
Very, very briefly, Councillor Lees. I'm not sure what comes before us because we have no choice. I mean, essentially, it's permitted, and so it's been very nice to have questions and discuss it. But with absolutely no choice at all, it's there is only one answer, unfortunately.
Yeah, the reason why it's here is because the Parish Council objected to it. So, Councillor Bealer.
Yeah, I mean, I dispute that, Axel. I mean, the reason why we're here is because we're a planning committee and we are the representatives of the people to the council, and not the council to the people. And what we're tacitly all acknowledging is that putting surface water into the foul sewage network is a problem, and it will cause hydraulic overload and potentially sewage in people's houses. And we're here to be a backstop to look at all the facts and say, actually, we think it's wrong, and therefore we're going to object to it. If we literally can't do this, why was it ever at planning committee? Why are we even here? Why do we have planning committee? We're a functionless box ticking exercise that might as well not exist. So I dispute that. I think we do have a choice. We have agency. We can object. It might well get overturned, but sometimes it's important. This Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act 2010, right? It's still not come into force, and it's been on the book since 2010. Perhaps because district councils across the land are not bothering to do anything about it and not standing up for their residents and making a point that actually we shouldn't do what's wrong. We should do what's right. I visited the sewage treatment plant at Oxford, and Thames Water told me that one of their biggest problems is the broken network that's letting surface treatment into the foul sewage treatment plant, which means they're basically constantly pumping out raw sewage every time it rains into the Oxford ditch. And they said that one of the big problems is developers who, when nobody's looking, just attach this foul sewage treatment plant to the surface water network to the foul sewage treatment plant, and they can't cope with the flow rate when it rains heavily. What we've got here is a developer who's just saying they're going to do it, and we're just saying that's fine. And I think that's wrong, and that's why I couldn't possibly vote for this.
Thank you. Councillor Topping.
I don't like this application. I don't think it should have been given first time round, but it was.
It was with a condition.
Yes, it had a condition on it. It seems as if that condition might not be enforceable, and an alternative solution has been found. It doesn't seem to me, unfortunately, that we have a lot of choice in this instance. But I just honestly believe this is an appalling overdevelopment of a very small site, and that is what has caused the problem. It could otherwise have been dealt with if it had not been designed in the way that it was. But given that it was given, and we're now looking at the consequences of that, and I don't think we have any choice but to go with the officer's recommendation, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Is there any other further comment? Seen on, so I go back to Councillor Norman to sum up.
This is why I reserve my right, because Councillor Rob summarises everything so well for me, and I don't have to make the effort. I think this is somewhat of a storm in a teacup, a 1 in 100-year storm, if you like. The quantity that we are all going to be subjected to more flooding in the future. There is a great deal of climate change coming. I don't think that a third of a ton of water an hour into the Dunstan and I sewage system is going to bring the end of the world. That may come for other reasons. I just also comment that I think somebody stated that the MP had objected to this, and I said, I'm just telling you that is not correct. He asked us to consider it very carefully. We did not, what we've been sent, he didn't actually object to it. Therefore, I think that as all other reasonable alternatives have been considered, and this is approved, this is recommended for approval by our own drainage officer and our own planning officer, we should approve it.
Thank you very much. We're going straight to the vote. All those in favour of the proposal or the officer's recommendation, please show. 1, 2, 3. That's 8. One against. One against. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Vic.
Thank you very much.
Right,
Yes,
Two minutes break, or let's swap over if you like. Right, we'll start again, please. Okay. We're on to P25 S3192, which is a White House in Focus Green. Planning Officer is Victoria. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you. Officers are recommending this application for approval, and it's been referred to Planning Committee because the Parish Council's opinion conflicts with that of officers. The application site is located within the village of Tocas Green and is accessed by a Gooseberry Road, which is a private residential cul-de-sac that serves approximately 15 dwellings, including the White House. There are no site constraints. The application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a detached two-storey infill dwelling with associated parking spaces. Policies in the South Oxfordshire Local Plan and Kidmore End Neighbour Development Plan support infill development in Tocas Green. The proposal is therefore acceptable in principle. The proposed dwelling is traditional in form and reflects elements of design of nearby properties. Officers consider the proposed scale and design of the house as acceptable and would be in keeping with the character of the surrounding area. Sufficient gaps would be retained between the neighbouring built form and the proposed dwelling. The proposed dwelling would have a side element that would be set back from the front elevation and set down in height with a lower roof ridge and eaves height. This would help provide visual separation between it and neighbouring property furrows, and officers consider it will sit well within the street. The proposal has been changed sufficiently from a previous scheme that was refused by officers and subsequently dismissed at appeal. The appeal decision and key drawings relating to this previous scheme are shown at Appendix D of the officer's report. The building has been reduced in scale close to the boundary with neighbouring property furrows. The proposed dwelling would have a staggered building line so that the higher elements would be set away from the side boundary with the neighbouring property. Officers consider the proposed built form would not therefore be visually intrusive or overbearing on furrows. The proposed dwelling would not be overbearing on neighbouring properties, nor would it result in an unacceptable loss of light or privacy to neighbouring occupiers or the future occupiers of the dwelling. In the opinion of officers, subject to the recommended conditions, the proposal would be sympathetic to the site and surrounding area. The proposal complies with the relevant development plan policies, and officers therefore recommend that members approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Okay, a number of speakers. The first one is Councillor Harland. You have your 5 minutes when you start speaking.
Indeed. Thank you to the chair, to the members of the committee. My name is Andrew Harland, and I am on the planning committee for the Kidmore End Parish Council. I'm also the person who oversaw the previous planning application for the White House development, which included building an almost exact copy of the White House and squeezing it into this narrow plot. The response of the Kidmore End Parish Council, backed by the SODC planning criteria, was to reject the new build and to accept the redevelopment of the White House, which was supported by myself, thinking that this was an acceptable solution for the plot. But here we are again. Now, I will not bore the pants off you people by referring back to the Kidmore End Parish Council's refusal on that application, referencing various criteria from the neighbourhood development plan, such as this creates dominance and enclosure, produces a cramped appearance inconsistent with the road, introduced constraints and substandard access to the rear of the property, and risks undermining the long-term sustainability and marketability of both properties. But at the heart of the Kidmore End Parish Council rejection of the previous application was that the plot is simply too narrow to accommodate two substantial dwellings without harm. That situation remains the same under this new application. The gap between the new house and the White House is now 1.21 metres. The appeal was dismissed when the gap between Furrows and the proposed new house was 1.2 metres. So why is this now acceptable to the planning committee? By granting permission to redevelop the White House under a former application, the applicant has in fact compromised their own future plans by reducing the possibility
of engineering a new build in an even smaller plot. For new builds, it has been cited that the owner of property must remain in residence for 3 years after the new build has been completed. But what happens after that? You have two properties sitting on top of each other with issues over privacy, access and welfare, which remain unresolved in this application, despite what the planning officer has put forward is now acceptable in her report. I quote 7, 8, 9 and 10. It must be remembered that planning is not only about numeral compliance. Can I finally draw the committee's attention to the SODC's pre-application advice to this applicant? To meet the correct planning criteria for the site, to be able to cope with two properties, it would be best, quote, to demolish the existing dwelling, the White House, and then erect two dwellings on the site, so that they would be better spaced out on that side. I therefore ask the committee to reject this application because it does not fulfil the basic planning criteria set out by the SODC, which we all adhere to, and to ask the applicant to resubmit a proposal for the whole site that will not compromise the long-term desirability and marketability of the site, where future purchasers will value their privacy, light and space and appropriate access. Thank you for your attention, and I'm open to any questions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Holland. You're well in time. Committee, any questions? See none, so thank you very much for your time.
Right. I also have copies of mine, what I've said, if people wish to have them.
We won't really have time to read them.
To reference. No. Okay, thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Christopher Marshall. Chapter. And again, you have 5 minutes from the moment you start speaking.
Chair and members of the committee, I'm a direct neighbour to this proposal and also represent other local objectors. We recognise that Topers Green is classified as an other village where infill is acceptable in principle, but needs to comply with the local plan, the NDP and the Joint Design Guide. Our objection is that this plot is too constrained to accommodate a dwelling of this size, requiring design compromises, meaning these policies are not met in multiple areas. The NDP infill policy instructs proposals to respect gap scale and layout of surrounding buildings. This proposal does not appropriately fit this policy, leaving a separation of only 1.2 metres to the White House and 2 metres to Furrows. Along Rosebery Road, typical gaps are larger and use varying roof pitches, reflecting the JDG's recommendations. These gaps and rhythms are fundamental to the area's open and spacious character, which this proposal detracts from. Mitigations from a previous proposal, rejected on the grounds of a terracing effect, do not remove this issue. Respectfully, while the officer's report states a terracing effect would not now be created, the new boundary running directly against the existing dwelling and the tight spacing described demonstrate the opposite. This is an overly engineered fit with an uncharacteristically tight grouping, eroding the spatial rhythm that NDP infill policy endeavours to safeguard. Local Plan DES 6 describes protections of residential amenity, including privacy, as does the NDP with respect to appropriate scale and massing. This proposal includes a large rear projection when compared to the scale and mass of Furrows, and a substantial side elevation close to boundaries to compensate for the narrow site. For Furrows, this creates an overbearing relationship to garden and patio areas and a detrimental feeling of enclosure to outdoor amenity. There are also privacy concerns. The design introduces large external doors facing the side boundary, which combine with the rear massing and elevated sight lines caused by rising ground levels. Occupants of Furrows will be able to see from upper windows directly into the proposed house's living area, as the site cannot accommodate the scheme without forcing compromised design solutions. We ask that you consider proximity of massing and the relationship of external openings as creating harms under policy DES 6 and the NDP, which this design fails to address. In considering the whole site, the officer's report describes the two dwellings being in the same ownership as mitigation for this proposal. Respectfully, we ask that you assess the existing house and the proposed self-build as separate dwellings over their full lifetimes. The placing of the plot boundary directly against the existing dwelling does not allow for boundary treatment, planting, access,
use of windows, and maintenance will be severely constrained, and future occupiers of the White House would inherit these problems. This is highly unusual for detached dwellings in the wider settlement, and we ask that you consider this in your assessment. When considering the street scene, the proposal conflicts with local plan policies and with the JDT's emphasis on space, landscape frontages, and local character. In addition to a terracing effect, a lack of meaningful boundary definition and an over-dominant road-facing gable end is out of character on a road where dormers are more typical. The frontage is dominated by parking and hard standing with very limited garden space. While the officer's report refers to planting, the overall effect remains one of hard surfacing and large built form, undermining the green, spacious rhythm that defines Rosebery Road in relation to policies DEF 2 and 5. Planning pre-application advice was to demolish the existing dwelling and erect 2 better spaced out dwellings to avoid the issues now highlighted, but that advice was not taken. A previous scheme on this site was refused and dismissed at appeal, and the White House has undergone recent substantial extension, which has compromised further development of the plot. The cumulative level of development now exceeds what the plot can reasonably accommodate without harm. The officer's report notes 27 objections, raising consistent concerns about overdevelopment, dominance, terracing, hard standing, and amenity impact. This reflects a shared and coherent reading of the site and its limitations. In conclusion, infill is supported where it respects gaps, scale, and layout, and is sympathetic to character. This proposal does not. It compresses a new dwelling into substandard separations, creates harmful amenity relationships, and erodes the spatial character that local and neighbourhood policy seeks to protect. For these reasons, I respectfully ask you to refuse the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time presentation. Pretty, any questions?
Just a brief question. We've seen several times the area map. I don't know if you can produce that, but sorry, we have it as well on our paperwork. There we are. You were saying that this is not characteristic of that area in terms of the massing, in other words, the gaps between houses. But looking at that, it would appear to be that many of the houses are in fact very close together, and that is not untypical of that area.
So it's not as rural as perhaps the other surrounding areas, but for example, to the other side of my property, Burrows, that's an 8-metre gap to the other property. To the other side of the White House, I believe, is close to 6. So we're talking about a 1.2-metre gap between the White House and the new proposed dwelling, which is highly unusual. In fact, you can't even put a fence down between them, to the points I made about being able to access the site.
It's sometimes hard to tell because, of course, they're showing garages and things on that as well.
Which are typical, yes.
But for example, if you look across the road, those gaps don't seem untypical.
That is the only property that abrupts like that. So across the whole road, there's a wider separation, there's garaging, there's different roof lines.
Okay.
Yes.
Can we just see the picture of the property?
Sorry.
Can you ask for that?
Can I ask?
You've had your 5 minutes.
So it may be clear if there's a photo.
Could we see the picture from the front of the site, looking into the site? Sorry, the photograph actually.
Yeah, there you
go. Is there one directly?
Do you have ones for across the road?
Yes. I don't think there was one actually.
So that photo is the closest of the front side.
Okay. I think we've gone as far as we're going to go with that one.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? No further questions. So thank you very much for your presentation and time. Okay. Our next speaker is Ian Hart, who is online.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
You've got 5 minutes now.
Right. Well, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I won't repeat the detailed analysis you've heard from the planning officer, but I would like to highlight a few brief points from the perspective of the applicant. That's me, Ian Hart. First, by way of background context, this proposal is a self-built home for my family. My wife and I live at the White House, which you've seen in the photos there, with our 2 young children, and we intend to build the new house and live in it ourselves. I mention that only because it explains why we've worked closely with an architect to revise the design from the ground up and address all of the issues raised previously. Members will be aware that there was a previous proposal on this point which was refused and dismissed on appeal, as we've heard. I understand why my neighbours remain sceptical because of that history. However, the officer's report explains that the scheme before you tonight has been changed sufficiently from the earlier proposal and should be assessed on its own merits. The earlier scheme raised concerns particularly about scale, spacing and the relationship with neighbouring properties, as well as the treatment of frontage along Rosebery Road. The revised design addresses those points. The new house has a stepped form with a side element that is both set back and lower in height, which breaks up the mass of the building and helps ensure the two houses do not read as a continuous wall in the street scene. Members may also have heard discussion about the spacing between the buildings just 1 minute ago. The gap between the houses is 1.2 metres on one side and 2 metres on the other side, to furrows. If you walk down the street there, you will see that there are many houses with approximately a 1 metre gap between them, as suggested by the plan there. The joint design guide generally suggests gaps should not be less than 1 metre, so this sits within that guidance. More importantly, the officer's report concludes that the step design provides adequate visual separation and avoids a terracing effect. Another point raised previously was the concern that the frontage could become dominated by hard standing rather than greenery. In this revised scheme, we have addressed that by proposing to relocate an existing cherry laurel hedge, which is approximately 3.5 metres high, from the side of our current house to run across most of the frontage of both existing and proposed houses. So in practical terms, that means that the street will continue to look verdant, and the new house will actually be partly screened from view, minimising its visual impact on Rosebery Road, even though I think it looks quite nice with the flint and brick face there. In terms of neighbour amenity, the officer's report explains that the staggered building line means that the proposal would not be visually intrusive or overbearing on the neighbouring property furrows, and that it complies with the 45-degree guideline for daylight loss from neighbouring windows at the back. I'm really emphasising policies here, which I hope the committee members appreciate. Parking has also been raised as an issue by some neighbours. The proposal provides 2 off-street parking spaces, which meets the council's parking standards, and 2 spaces plus a garage will be retained for the White House. That's our current house. The officer also notes that Rosebery Road is a private road and issues relating to parking management there are not planning grounds for refusal. I understand that some members of the parish council have also raised questions about landscaping and planting more generally. I'm happy for landscaping to be secured through planning conditions if necessary. And the officer has recommended a landscaping condition, I believe, requiring sorry, I'm not sure about that. I better double check that. But anyway, I would support landscaping conditions, right? I recognise that neighbours feel strongly about development close to their homes, and I respect those concerns. Yeah. However, the committee's role tonight is to consider whether the revised proposal causes unacceptable planning harm under the development plan. The officer's professional assessment concludes that it does not. The principle of infill development in this location is acceptable. The design and scale are appropriate for the site. The proposal would not result in unacceptable impacts on neighbouring amenity, highway safety or ecology. Planning decisions are not made by counting representations from neighbours, particularly when the same household makes multiple representations, but by assessing whether demonstrable planning harm arises. On that basis,
thank you, Mr. Hart. That's your time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, committee, any questions, Mr. Hart? Councillor Topping.
Just one.
It's gone. It's back.
Yeah, hi. It's really to ask, you presumably will be moving from the White House, as you said, into this new building. How will the new owner of the White House, or tenant, if you're going to let it out, maintain the elevation that runs adjacent to the new property, because as I see it, the new plot upon which you're building this house is on your building line on the White House. So how would you maintain that elevation? How would you paint it? How would you deal with problems with guttering and roofs and what have you?
Yes, that's good question. Yes, I appreciate the importance of this. My architect has chosen to draw the boundary line at the side of the White House. However, I did ask him on a number of occasions to put it halfway between the houses, and I think,
well, if you did that, you'd have less than a metre, wouldn't you? As the gap from the boundary to the new property. It basically, this is very, very tight, isn't it? And you are compromising the way this is being built in order to fit it into a gap that is insufficient. And it's compromising both the metre and the retained one.
Is this a question? All right, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'll answer that. The inspector who refused the previous permission didn't raise the issue of the relationship with the White House and the proposed new house at all as an issue, and that was when the proposal was for an 80-centimetre gap with no fence between them. So that's why we've cited it with a 1.2 metre gap on one side and a 1.6 metre to the boundary and 2 metres to the house furrows on the other side. If this is fundamental as an issue, then we could move the proposed design slightly nearer to furrows. But I mean, this was not raised as an issue in the previous inspector's refusal. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hart. Pretty, any further questions? I see none. So thank you very much for your time and presentation. Thank you. Right, so we go back to Victoria, who's sat here waiting for questions. Any questions? Councillor Nolan.
Yes, so just a couple of things. Do we have any obligation to care about the future occupant of the White House legally, given that the applicant is actually, occupies the White House and owns that house? Do we have any duty of care whatsoever to future occupants?
Yes, we have to consider future occupiers of any neighbouring property, whether it's occupied by the applicant or not. We've taken the view in terms of the impact of the windows looking out. Every window that is on the side elevation has a front or rear window, so rooms aren't going to be affected by light. In terms of maintenance of the wall, there's the Party Wall Act. So if neighbours don't allow access to maintenance, and there's obviously civil legal matters that they can get, enable them to do that. And then in terms of the boundary fence, that's not set in stone. It's obviously shown on plan here. The 1 metre gap is guidance. It's mainly to allow access to a rear of the property, so they've got at least 1 metre on one side, and then it's also to maintain a visual gap between properties to avoid a terracing effect. And we feel that obviously you've got the break in the built form of 1 metre on one side, and then the step down in the built form on the other side, which prevents the terracing appearance and the break in the physical form.
Thank you very much. And the other question is rather wider. The inspector's report had, from paragraph 12 to 21, there are a lot of different reasons given why that appeal was turned down. Are you confident? Are you content that all of those objections, without me going through them all, because obviously we've all read them, are you content that those have all been adequately addressed?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Thank you.
I see no further questions.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, Claire, thank you. Victoria, could you just briefly summarise the key differences between the scheme that was refused at appeal and this scheme here that means that you're satisfied that this new scheme meets planning policy? As I see it, the gap between the proposed house and the neighbouring houses, those two gaps have increased?
Yes, they have. They've both increased. The design of the property has been changed, so it's not such a solid frontage. You've got the gable and then you set back in the frontage, which you can see, I think, in the site plan, that it's a staggered building line. So in terms of the street scene, I think it's much less imposing and fits better in the street. In terms of the impact on the neighbour, they've moved it in from the boundary and again reduced the height slightly and staggered the building line so that it's not as imposing, and in my opinion, not harmful. Yeah, won't result in terms of loss of light, and it's no longer overbearing.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions. Thank you, Victoria. I think we need to move to a proposal. Councillor Norman.
I'm happy to propose going with the officer recommendation to approve.
Okay, thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor Duncan, thank you. You wish to speak now, or?
Oh, hold my.
Hold you. Same with Councillor Norman. Let's open for debate. There is no debate. Therefore, I go back to Councillor MacDonald.
I still support officers' recommendation, as Victoria very clearly laid out the fact that the issues that arose before have been resolved, at least to the satisfaction of the officers, and it looks like by the satisfaction of the committee as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor MacDonald. I go back to Councillor Norman to sum up.
I very much understand the dissatisfaction and concern of neighbours in situations like this. However, there is an infill policy in this development plan, in the neighbourhood plan rather, and there will be a gain of one dwelling, and it appears from the report and from the officer's answers that all the concerns or objections that the planning inspector raised at the appeal, this is a very substantially different dwelling that is being put before us now, rather than the one that was dealt with, turned down before and then turned down at appeal, and I believe it should be approved by the committee.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Norman. Thank you, committee. All those in favour of the proposal for the show? 7, all those against, 1 against, 1 abstention.
1 abstention.
That is passed. So thank you. Okay, our next meeting is. Oh, I've got appeals information at the end of the note.
Thank you, gentlemen, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that you're not adhering to your own planning criteria.
Yeah. Notes or comment on any of all the appeals information?
Are we still live?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Comments on them? I think.
Sorry, Chair, what is the question?
I would say, is there any comments on the appeal decisions which are included in your agenda? No, we also say anything. Okay, that's fine.
If that includes the appeal on the recent decision of Chalgrove.
I can read that.
It's not there, is it?
It's not
No, it's not in this list.
Okay.
It's not there.
What's the one?
It's still hopefully going to make a response.
Yeah, no, that's not there. In which case we would. Yeah, the appeal decision on Chalgrove was very disappointing.
Members will be aware that
They're going to make some sort of statement, is my understanding.
members will be aware that there's a series of meetings being set up to discuss appeals, so you'll be able to talk about appeal decisions. I hope you've all received the
And now there's
invitation.
another application coming, you probably realise.
Yeah, that's all the appeals. Yeah. Our next meeting is in That's 2 weeks time.
Yeah, first. First week.
1st of April.
After midday.
But it's in the evening, so that's all.
Susie, can we stop the broadcast, please? Many thanks.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.